Hey everyone, Devon Grier here. I know I'm a little late on this video. I had some family issues come up over the week and I've been super busy. But as promised, we're going to deliver a review today on Manjaro Linux. For those of you who are wondering why I'm on a web page and not the desktop, I am going to show the desktop. I have the virtual machine loaded of it, but I also want to cover some of the things that makes Manjaro Linux unique. First of all, when we're talking about the name, I've heard someone specific on YouTube call it, makes it very clear that it is pronounced Manjaro Linux. However, if anyone's ever heard the term of killer of Manjaro, it's pronounced with a J. And I've watched interviews with the developers. They even call it Manjaro, so I don't know who's right. And just like everything in Linux, we all pronounce things differently. So just bear with me. If you think it's pronounced as Manjaro, good for you. Call it that. I'm just going to call it Manjaro. So what is Manjaro Linux? Well, it is based on Arch Linux. And basically what they do, so Arch Linux releases updates as soon as possible. I mean, they could be updating everything daily, every couple days. And even if the core portion of Arch is updating maybe every couple days, other programs could be updating daily. Manjaro Linux does it kind of differently. They almost do kind of like a Debian style. They have an unstable branch, a testing branch, and a stable branch. And the development goes through that process, and I'll get into the development a little bit more. Some people have said that they're like the Ubuntu of Arch. It's partially true, partially not, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more when we get into the system. But what is cool is it is a rolling release. So once you install Manjaro Linux, you're good to go. There is no 6-month releases, yearly releases, whatever. It's launch it once, just run your updates, and if there are little fixes that need to be done, do them when necessary, and it's good. Some things that are interesting is they do have a blog, and unlike Elementary OS, who updates their blog quarterly, this guy, Film, who I believe is the head developer of the project, and I may be butchering his name, so if you watch this film, don't be upset. He updates very regularly. He posts videos of himself showing some stuff off, and we'll kind of talk about Calmaris a little bit. I haven't used it, but I'll talk about why it's cool from what I did watch in the video. You get what's called update packs. So right now we're on Manjaro 0.8.10, and the update packs basically are updates to that version of Manjaro. And then about, I think it's like once every 2 to 3 months, they launch a major update, which then the version number will change. So right now it's pre-2's 0.8.11. This will include heavier updates, push new features and functions in, all sorts of really, really cool stuff. You know, like big thing right now is like they'll be pushing kernel 3.14, or they'll have big updates for it, which is great. And then they have the other thing that's really cool about is community work gets posted here. Well, this gentleman's named Spatry. He talks about Manjaro all the time. Big fanboy of it. And you know, fanboy is not always a bad term. And Manjaro is a really good distribution. They deserve people like him. And then they'll even post stuff about community spins that are taking place. Once we're done with the review, if you're very interested in it, you go to Manjaro's main website, click on Get Manjaro, and you'll come here. Their main support editions, and main support means that the developers are actively working on these editions. They have an XFCE edition, an OpenBox edition, a KDE edition, which last time I checked, KDE didn't used to be a main spin. However, Netrunner took on a Manjaro with a KDE desktop, and I believe that's how they're able to maintain this right now. And then you have the Minimal Net edition. Now you have community editions, and with the community editions, basically this is where you can get all the other ones. Basically the community puts these together. The Manjaro developers help when time and resources are available. From watching Spatry a little bit, because he has his own spin as well, I guess the Manjaro developing teams are real heavy helpers in this area, and they do really well on it. So, and like I said, you can just come here and pick your desktop and go with the flow. All right, so now let's get into the actual desktop here. This is I have Manjaro with XFCE installed. The installer is very easy. It's very much like the Ubuntu installer. I mean, it's not the Ubuntu installer, but it's similar in sense if you've used the Ubuntu installer, you could use their installer. The thing that's cool about Manjaro is they don't build a lot of custom things. What I mean by that is they don't, like, you know, you use Cinnamon with Linux Mint or Ubuntu. There may be some custom work done in the GUI. No, this is XFCE, and I believe it's the Numix theme that they're using. It looks very much like it, and I think they're using the icon themes. I can't remember the name of the icon themes, but I know that it's the same ones used in Linux Mint. So they use open source community themes with an open source community built desktop, and that's what they push for their main stuff. They have standard applications across the board. There's no real need to go into it. But what I did find cool was they support the HP device manager. And when I've tried Manjaro in the past, it does work. In Arch Linux, I didn't have as much luck and just ended up going with cups because it was less painless. But this was definitely really good. If we head over here into games, there's Steam. And I mean, Steam being a main supported application is really awesome. When I've used Steam in the past, it's one of those things where it may or may not work with that distribution if it's not an Ubuntu or Ubuntu base. Being the fact that they're pushing it, and from what I've seen on the forums, it seems like 98% of the games run just fine in Manjaro Linux, and if there's one that doesn't, it's really a question of downgrading or upgrading a lib. And usually people have seen it. You can Google it. You can find it really, really easy. Another great thing to talk about with them is their software installing application. It is something kind of unique. The Arch community also has it available, but it's cool that they ship it. So right now, let's say I'm interested in, well, I'm using Simple Screen Recorder. So let's say we go Simple Screen Recorder, and I push enter. These are produced by the Manjaro repositories. So example being, it may be a community repository, but it is being supported by the Manjaro developers. Okay. Now, if say I'm like, oh, and I don't think this is the case, but let's say it is an older version than what I'm looking for, I can click on search the AUR, push enter again, and give it a minute to load. It will actually load stuff from the Arch user repository, okay, and that's really awesome because these could be officially supported versions coming from the correct developers. And even in some cases, if you can't find a package that is not in the Manjaro official repository, you're going to find it in the AUR. Now, for some of you who are like, what is the AUR? That is the Arch user repository. It is a community-maintained repository that has community-maintained packages. And it's kind of like Ubuntu's PPA system, but it doesn't break things as nearly as often. It's really nice. Now, the only downside I see to this is the Ubuntu PPA system requires me to actually go to the official PPA pages, and it allows me to actually see, is this an officially maintained PPA? Is this a being pushed? What are the names of the developers who are pushing these packages? This kind of takes that away. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't view that information, because I could just go into here, and type in Simple Screen, let's see, Screen Recorder, AUR, okay, and I can actually go over to the AUR page and pull the information on everything I need to know, and I can also look at community feedback. People will let you know, hey, this package is outdated, hey, this package seems malicious, all these different things. You can also look at dependencies. So if you're having a hard time getting an app to run, you can come over to the AUR page and say, oh, I don't have this installed. I need to make sure this is installed before this will work. Like I said, there are ways for you to view to make sure things are legit. However, I think if end users start coming over to Manjaro Linux, they're not going to be paying attention, and unless someone in the AUR catches it, some malicious code or malicious applications could possibly punch through. Now, a complaint I had with Manjaro is they offer this update manager, right here. Well, of course, it's going to tell me the system's up to date. Let's see if I can open it this way. This is your update manager. In my experience, the update manager does not always work. It's not a flawless system at all. It's just, yeah, it does work sometimes, and other times it doesn't. So just to kind of let you guys know, it is Arch based, which means it uses the Arch style of things. So if I wanted to run an update, you would just do a sudo pacman -syu, type in your sudo password, and it'll go through the process of checking everything. More than likely, I just installed this today. There's not going to be anything there to do. If you do a fresh install of Manjaro Linux, I'm telling you right now, it took almost 15 minutes to download and install updates because there was a ton of them. But Pacman's very versatile. For those of you who want to use the AUR but maybe don't want to use the GUI tools, it's real simple. Just do a YORT and then the package name. So we'll just do the simple screen recorder since we were on the subject. It'll pull. It gives you options. Sometimes you can be able to see the votes and how many people are using it and all that other good information. And then you pick which one you want to do. And typically, I always recommend going with the most popular one, like this one here. And you would just push 4, push enter, and then follow the instructions from there. It's really easy to use. If you're one of those who gets easily upset by command line, then you don't end up using a lot of command line with Manjaro. But occasionally you may need to. So if you get easily upset by having to use that command line, this is not your distro. So, I mean, there's not really much more to talk about Manjaro. We covered the fact it's Arch-based, which is really cool because I'm tired of seeing Ubuntu-based distributions come around that are offering nothing new. And they're like, look, we offer design. Yeah, so do theme packs with the GTK, my friend. Sorry, I'm sorry. No, thank you. I was playing with some themes the other day and made my Unity setup look very close to OS X with no problems. Anyway, so there's like I said, there's a lot. Like I said, the big things is it's a rolling release, so you'll never have to install it over again. If you've heard anything about Arch, you know that Arch Linux is one of the most stable rolling releases out there for what they do. And it's extraordinarily fast, so Manjaro Linux may be your guy, because the thing that is different from Ubuntu to Debian and Manjaro to Arch is Manjaro is trying to provide ease of use while being as close to Arch Linux as possible. Ubuntu has no problem breaking away from Debian to do something to provide features and functionality. The Manjaro team sits down and says, how can we stay aligned? Because at the end of the day, the development we do, we can contribute back to the Arch guys. So, that's something else. I remember. The other thing I wanted to go over is this is what I'm talking about with community. So, Clamaris, what is it? It is a new GUI installer they're working on. One of the things they found was Ubuntu has a great installer. The problem is if you're not a Debian-based distribution, it can be kind of hard to implement that installer into your software. Clamaris they're working on and developing, and it's going to become the primary installer for Manjaro Linux, but it's also very, how should I put it, open in the sense that it'll run almost in any distribution. It is not, like I said, don't get confused when distributions say, hey, this is open source. Is it? Yes. Can you view the source code? Yes. But that doesn't mean it will implement well into other distributions and desktops. It doesn't mean that at all. That's the cool thing about Clamaris, is Clamaris is literally being designed to be very open in the sense it's going to be very easy. If I tomorrow decide to create my own spin of, say, Gentoo, I don't know why I would do that, but we'll say Gentoo, I can take the Clamaris installer and use it and don't get me wrong, there'll be some tweaking that I'll have to do, but it's not like, oh man, I'm going to have to rework this whole thing to get it working. No, that's one of the cool things. Every time they do something, they take it into consideration of how will this help open source? How is this something that we can run on our distribution, but will also run on other ones who maybe aren't Arch-based? Could it run in an RPM ecosystem? Could it run in a Debian ecosystem? Could it run in Gentoo ecosystem? I mean, they really look at those things. So the question we have, okay, is You see, real pretty looking. What are we going to rate this, right? You know, like 2 weeks ago we gave Elementary OS a 4 out of 10. And the main reason it was is Elementary OS didn't live up to... They were producing a product for a certain group of people, but there was a lot missing and a lot of issues. If people in that group needed it to do something, it wouldn't perform. Main big issue was hardware support. And for those of you who are wondering, and I'll double check while we're on this, is the kernel version. I believe it's 3.12. And the main reason why it's not all the way up to date is because they do not push... 3.12. They do not push. The kernel will continue to upgrade, but they wait till it's in a very stable state to move it. So everyone does have hardware support currently, and Manjaro Linux does have, you go to the wiki page, it is one of the easiest ways to install a kernel that I've ever seen. Like, ridiculously easy to install and remove. So the question is, can Manjaro Linux, which we rated, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, because there's still a lot missing, but there's a lot getting done, I'm going to give this guy a 10 out of 10. And here's the reason why. And I'm not going to give almost any distribution a 10 out of 10. But the reason why this one earns a 10 out of 10 is this is one of the only distributions I've seen where I say, I could replace Ubuntu with this. There's not many others. Don't get me wrong. It's not to say like, oh, I couldn't replace it with Linux Mint, because yes, Linux Mint provides all the same great tools and great features as Ubuntu. But I don't want something that is like Ubuntu because it's based on Ubuntu. I want something that's like Ubuntu in the terms of they're moving to their own flow. You think of Linux Mint. Linux Mint is based off Ubuntu, which Ubuntu is based off Debian. That's a lot of basing to take place. Arch is independently developed. The Manjaro team is developing off of it, and they are really trying to make sure that if you download an application, it will work out of the box. Your Steam games will work, and anytime they build something, they sit down and say, what can we use from the open source community in terms of theming and all this other great stuff, and what can we give back to the open source community? Like I said, Ubuntu can sit down and say, well, our installer is open source, anyone can use it, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of back work that has to happen in order to use that on some other forms of distributions. Some of the stuff they build is being used on other distributions, and it works flawlessly. I mean, I'm not saying there's no tweaking that has to be done, but they take in mind the consideration of community work. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, guys, in the future if I do a video and you see me moved over to Manjaro Linux. I'm highly considering it. Like I said, there's a couple things I'm trying to get ironed out that I'm kind of sitting down and going, this just works in Ubuntu and Manjaro. There's a little bit of tweaking that has to be done. But these guys build something that is competitive with Ubuntu, that isn't based on Ubuntu. Like I've said this in the past to buddies of mine, you cannot compare an Ubuntu base because that product is only as successful as Ubuntu. The day Ubuntu falls off, they then have to come up with a new business model because their main base went away. Arch Linux is obviously not going anywhere, and I'm not saying that Ubuntu is, but Manjaro is a beast moving to its own beat, like how Ubuntu is with Debian, and I think that's excellent. So anyway, next week we're going to be looking at we're going to be reviewing Bondi, or you maybe could call it Bodhi, I'm not entirely sure, Linux. It's a Ubuntu base that is rolling release and uses the Enlightenment desktop. That is just cool. We'll see how that does and where that works in. And I think in the future, and I gotta look up the name, I can't remember the name, I can't remember if it's like Koran, well, not Koran, but Korean or something. There is something that is based on Fedora that gives you all the love that you would like in an Ubuntu world with proprietary software support and everything, but it's based on Fedora. So if you're like a big Red Hat fanboy, but you're like, Jesus, I just want Fedora to do something better than what it is, you watch, like I said, it'll be coming after my Bodhi Linux video. Check it out. It's going to showcase some of the cooler aspects of the RPM side of the house. I'm trying to cover everything from Ubuntu to Ubuntu flavors to Arch flavors to RPM side. All right, guys, if you have any questions about my experience with Manjaro Linux, because I have ran it on native hardware on other machines, post those questions. If you have any comments, please post. Like I said, I don't care if they're even kind of negative. I had someone kind of not like some of the things they said about Elementary OS. That's fine. Go ahead, throw it down. and we'll talk about it, and that we can make it a good place for people who are curious about the project to find my video, watch my video, and scroll down and see what our conversations were on it. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll try and get a video up by next week.